Hello, all. Danny Doyle with Safety Components, here to introduce Lieutenant Steve Robertson, who's joining us for the March edition. He's going to talk to you, as Steve often does, about everything engine company. He's going to introduce estimating the stretch. And to use his words, it is a lost art in the fire service. It's one of those things since Crosslays or Matty Dales or Pre-Connects, we sometimes come up short or can have way too much hose, and that's harder to manage than coming up short sometimes and extending. So he's going to talk about how to get it just right, from positioning all the way to deploying. Hopefully Steve's going to come back and elaborate on that in upcoming editions. So thank you for your time, Steve. It's greatly appreciated, and be safe all. Take care.
Steve Robertson here from Stretching for Success, here to talk to you a little bit about how to estimate the stretch, where to do it, when to do it, why to do it, and something that's kind of a lost art in the fire service, and I feel still vitally important to having a successful engine company operation, especially when you first do it. Sets everything up to get going forward and making the push on the fire. Got some slides here we're going to go over and some examples of how to estimate the stretch. So let's get into it. Okay, so positioning the first engine. Positioning the first engine is one of the most important things we can do on a fire. When we position the engine correctly, the stretch goes well. If the stretch goes well, then the push will go well. We only get one shot to do it. So we got to remember, we must position for our first line. We want to leave room for the truck. That's very important, but we still have to position for our line. Second thing, the fire will go as the first line goes, and first line will go as positioning goes. Okay, so if we position well, the stretch goes well. You only get one chance to get it right. We only get one chance to get it right. We've all been on the fire where we've positioned the engine incorrectly. We have to move it. We've already got lines down. That just creates a huge nightmare and a lot of time that we don't have on a fire. Remember, we're already behind. Too much hose can be as much of a hindrance as not enough hose. When it comes to short setbacks, etc., too much is as bad as not enough, if not worse. So remember that when we start talking about estimating stretch. All right, let's take a look at this video. And this is where stretching or estimating the stretch really comes into play. You see we got a garage well involved. They position probably just like they were taught, which is a lot of people are taught, line up your crosslay with the fire. The problem we have here is a 20-foot setback. They either have a 150, 200-foot line maybe. And with that being said, they literally have to run away from the fire only to turn around and run back to it. If we estimate that stretch and look at it, we pull the engine past the fire, then we're making one move toward the fire. We're not running away from it only to come back to it. That's a pretty valuable thing when it looks at time. That takes time to do that thing. We're already behind. The fire's growing exponentially. We know that. So if we pull past here and we simply make one movement back toward the fire, we're not only saving time, but we're going to get water on the fire much quicker. The second thing it does by pulling past is it allows the truck company to have the front of the building. Allowing them to have the front of the building gets ground ladder access faster, all those things that need to happen. They need to get to the roof for vertical ventilation. Any of those things that can help us as the engine company can happen much quicker. So where the rubber meets the road, estimating the stretch. Let's talk about that a little bit. It must be done on every fire. Yes, even with pre-connected hand lines. Pre-connected hand lines is kind of where we got away from estimating stretch. Most of us were taught if it's a short setback, we pull the little line, the short line. If it's a long setback, we pull the longer line. That doesn't always work. And even on short setbacks, the short line sometimes is still way too much. So we need to estimate the stretch. It's vitally important, and that's going to determine the position of the first engine. And again, that's going to determine the position of the first engine. And when we say that, that also sets up the second engine and the ladder and everybody else as far as positioning goes. And again, too much hose can be a hinder as much as being short. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. But the basic rule of thumb in estimating stretch. Here's a formula that I use and I've used for a long time as on the right front seat of an engine, to be able to estimate the stretch and set ourselves up positioning that first truck. Take the length of the structure plus the width of the structure plus the setback from the street. Okay, and then we add one length above or below the first floor. Pretty simple. When we do those things, good things are going to happen for us. We're setting the line up. We're only using the working length of what we need to cover that entire structure. Now, let's look at this real quick. We got a 40 on this one by 30. We add those two numbers together. A 40 by 30 is 70 feet. Then we take the setback from the street. That equals 95. Add that together. And then we add one length of hose because it's a second story fire. That gives it 145 feet total. So when we look at 145 feet total, what are you going to do with the other 55 feet in a 25-foot setback if you don't pull past? We can eat that. We can eat a whole extra section of hose up by pulling past the fire, which would help us immensely in doing that. So remember that when we do this. Now you're thinking to yourself, you're asking me to do math in the middle of a fire. No, I'm not. I'm asking you when you're out on EMS runs or you look at your district, start looking at a few things. The first thing you look at is when you look down the street in the urban environment or even in the suburban environment, when you're talking about housing developments, all of the setbacks are really, really, really close to each other. And if you look at a housing development, and again, even in an urban environment, all these houses were built relatively at the same time. So you're looking at 2, maybe 3 styles of houses on that street. They're all going to be within a couple hundred square feet of each other. So with that being said, if I've got configure in a housing development this one structure that's 30 by 40, right, 2-story, but it maybe has a 30-foot setback or 35-foot setback, I've pretty much figured the whole neighborhood. I can tell you in my district from I-71, Cleveland Avenue to Hudson, all the way over to Jefferson, I can tell you I pull 2 to 2.5 houses past the fires where my tailboard is. That gives me enough hose. Now what I can do there, if it's a little bigger house, I stop a little shorter. If it's a little smaller house, I go a little farther. The more you do this, the more you'll see you can adjust on the fly, and it's going to make it much, much easier for you. The other thing we didn't talk about is the fluff that's built into the formula. As you see, I gave a 50-foot length to go from the first floor to the second floor. We don't need 50 feet. We don't need a 50-foot length. It takes about 20 to 25 feet to get there. So a full 50 foot, we built in about a 20, 25 foot fluff there. The other thing I never talked about was the reach of the stream. If you use the reach of the stream, you're going to add 50 to 60 feet to anything you do. Most dwellings we go into, again, you open the front door, you can hit the back door with the stream. Now, I'm not talking about your McMansions. Those are, we still have to estimate that stretch, but it's going to take more hose. But the majority of the dwellings we go to, you can hit the back door from the front door. So use the reach of your stream. So there are some examples on how to estimate the stretch, what we do, how we do it, why we do it. And again, get out there, get in your neighborhoods, practice what we're doing. And again, stretch for success, stay safe. If you have any questions or anything, comments or anything, my contact info is there. And please feel free to reach out. Stay safe.